last weekend I went to YCS Pasadena. I've already posted a couple of videos from there, but I have not posted my actual deck profile from the main event. To many people's surprise, I did not play Altergeist, I did not play Frogs, I played Burning Abyss. Now, I have played this deck for a while, I just haven't played it recently. Obviously, I made that video like a couple weeks ago saying I was playing it badly, but actually I spent the last like 3 weeks really testing this deck. I went to several locals and went undefeated, which isn't like a huge deal, like it's just locals, but it was good testing. There weren't any regional qualifiers really to the past couple weeks near me at all, so it was good testing. I felt like I was really comfortable with this deck, and I wanted to play this deck for the same reason that people wanted to play this deck like in 2014. Like in Burning Abyss, you get to play the game every single game, and I know it sounds crazy, but like with Altergeist, I'd go second and I wouldn't be able to break a board. I remember I lost a game at YCS Niagara to someone that ended up topping that event with Pendulums, but I lost the game because he literally just ended with the Dzeeff Link monster and one Vortex Dragon and no other negates, and I could not deal with the one Vortex Dragon because the deck is too slow, and that was just way too much. You'd also like go first, not draw a monster, and just get killed because you don't have any monsters. So I wanted to play a deck that could always play the game. I did find out at this tournament that like a lot of people just don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! It's crazy. People just like other than Sky Strikers, which is kind of like this deck where it wants to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Like all the Floodgate decks don't want you to play Yu-Gi-Oh! All the FTK decks don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! All the Extra Link decks don't want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! But Burning Abyss wants to play Yu-Gi-Oh! As far as my record goes, didn't do that well. Obviously, I didn't like top or anything. I didn't even day 2. I started out really well, and then just kind of went downhill. This deck definitely does have some problems. The main problem is that it is kind of random sometimes. You can set up your graveyard as much as you want, but if the Hydrolaner just mills the 2 of that you haven't seen before, like in your hand, you just get screwed, so that kind of sucks. But I don't know. Hydrolaner is like the best and the worst card in this deck, but it's rough out there. Anyway, let's get in the profile. So we have 2 copies of Skarm, 2 copies of Farfa, 2 copies of Libic, and then just 1 copy of all the rest. So we got Graf, Seer, Calcab, Barbar, and Alec. I mean, what do I say about these? Like, they're all basically normal monsters except for Seer, and then sometimes they're not normal monsters. Like, Alec is good against Thunder Dragons, Calcab's good against, like, Sky Strikers, Barbar's good for game, Farfa's good for clearing the board. But overall, all these cards are pretty much just normal monsters that are good because Dante and Beatrice are good. You wouldn't play these cards if they were just, like, normal cards that didn't interact with Dante. But Dante getting, like, free pluses is really, really powerful. So you gotta play those, obviously. I think that was right in the middle of where people play these, because I played 11, some people play 12, some people play 10. I felt like 11 was a good number, though. I didn't like 3 Skarm at all. Phoenix Rhino Warrior is the actual best card in this entire deck. This is it's the best card because it gets you every single card. Like, it gets you to Burning Abyss monsters, it gets you to Fabled Sulcus. It's just really powerful. It's also the most difficult card to deal with in relation to Hydrolander, because with the BA monsters, you can just banish them with Barbar, but when you get extra Phoenix Rhino Warriors, it just like loses you the game. Like, I lost, like, you're not going to play 2 this card because it is so good to open. It's the card you want to open, but there were so many times where I would make a Dante with a Phoenix Rhino Warrior with like Hydrolander or 2 Hydrolaners in hand, and then I would mill a second Phoenix Rhino Warrior, and like it's literally impossible to get out of the graveyard without snow, and you can't really make a snow in the first turn without making a Beatrice with Sulcus and Malicious. You can't always do that, so I don't know, like, you have to play 3 because it's the best starter card in the entire deck. It combos with every card in the entire deck, but like the problem is you can't get out of the graveyard without snow, and that really sucks. But 1 copy of Tour Guide, because it's I mean, it's not it's weird saying Tour Guide isn't as good as Rhino, but Rhino is like definitely better, just because, I don't know, like, Tour Guide gets to Rhino, but Tour Guide is like the card you search with Skarm if you actually don't OTK your opponent. And then we have so I know whenever I play a deck, right, I know that it's gonna be profiled. I know that I'm gonna have to explain my choices. This is a choice I can't defend. Like, you shouldn't play 3 Snake. I just didn't want to break the band up. I didn't want to break the 3 Musketeers up, so I played 3 Snake. I felt that it was fine. Honestly, this card is a very good card in this deck. It's basically Gallus, but with an Upstart Goblin draw. It's really, really powerful. In the past, like at locals, it interfered with Hydrolander, but I cut a lot of the other 3-ofs, and this card didn't. I never actually milled 2 Snake with Hydrolander, so I was perfectly satisfied with the 3 copies. I sided 1 out a lot too, and then 2 copies of Jackalope, which is pretty standard. But definitely, if you play a stack, just play 2 Snake and 2 Jackalope. That's the way it should go. I just wanted to play 3 Snake. Give me a break. And then we have 2 copies of Gallus, one of the best starters in this deck besides Snake. It's so good at because it's the guaranteed and like free all the time. Like you don't need to have multiple copies of anything. You don't need to have any sort of setup. You don't need to have a hand. You can just summon Gallus and mills a card. It does like a bajillion damage to your opponent because you always mill a Kaiju. It's just a really powerful card. I liked it a lot. And then the engine that everyone's playing now, I don't know who came up with this, but they're a genius. We have 3 copies of Malicious, 1 copy of Sulcus. If you don't know what these do, basically the Malicious helps you link climb, well at least the first one does, and then you can summon Malicious next to Sulcus and make a Beatrice, and then use its effect immediately to send like Snow or something, so it just pushes for so much damage. Very often after you use the first Malicious to link climb into the Boral Sword, you summon the 3rd Malicious, and then you switch it to defense, and then do your Beatrice play, so then you have Boral Sword with 2 attacks and a Beatrice, that's 8,500 damage. Now they're dead, so it's really good, but I don't know if Malicious will get hit because of like every deck abusing it, but if it gets hit, this will hurt the deck a ton. This engine is super important. I don't know if you can play this deck without this engine, I'll be honest. And then 1 copy of Snow. It's a card that I wish I milled more often. Like, you're not going to play more than 1 copy because that's really bad, but I wish I milled this card more often. But obviously, it's like the card, you don't really send Farfa anymore with Beatrice. It's not impactful enough, but Snow is really good because Snow, like, a Farfa is a Farfa, right? But a Snow is a Snow, and then also it triggers your Hydrolanders later on because you can, if you don't know how Hydrolander works, which speaking of, I guess we'll just show it right now. So we have 3 copies of Hydrolander, which is like a really important part of this deck because I feel this card's ridiculous. Hydrolander, when you mill for costs, if you mill any duplicates, you can just banish them with Snow, and then it still resolves. It's just really broken. So this card is like the best and the worst card in the deck. I mentioned that before. The reason is that you'll have hands where this card will literally just win you the game, and then you'll have hands where you mill the 2nd Rhino, or like I didn't mill the snakes ever, but one time I set up a board where I Kaiju'd my opponent's monster, and then I was going to Hydrolander to destroy the Kaiju, and then summon Vanity's Fiend on top of the Hydrolander so that he just was locked out of the game. And then I milled 2 Jackalope with this, like that weren't in the grave. Like there wasn't 1 Jackalope in the grave. I milled 2 Jackalope off my 3 mills with this card, so I couldn't pop the Kaiju, and then I couldn't summon the Vanity's Fiend because Kaiju had more than the Vanity's Fiend. It was just really bad, but this card is really good, and it is like the namesake. It's just sometimes it can be very frustrating, namely with like Fiendish Rhino Warrior. And then as sort of an option I think some people are catching on to, I thought was really good, Dark Arm Dragon. This is a card that you don't think is good until you like play this deck against like Sky Strikers, but why this card is so good is because you have so much graveyard manipulation, and you can just like summon it really early on in the turn, pop a couple cards, and then continue your plays, put more Darks in your grave, and then pop more cards, especially because when you Kaiju your opponent that's playing Sky Strikers, they can't activate any of their back row because they have a monster in the main monster zone. You can just blow up their entire board. It's ridiculous. This card is really good. And then, I watched Thomas Rose's deck profile. He doesn't know who I am. It doesn't really matter for this video, but I took a lot of inspiration from it. He was actually like the person that inspired me to play this deck in the first place. I think his success with the deck is really cool. But he was playing no hand traps in his build at London, and I wanted to play some, but I wanted to play some Kaijus as well. So for the Kaijus, to be completely honest, I literally just picked up Kaijus that were around my house. So I had Gamma Seal, Raiden, Dogoran, and this weird guy. I think I should have played a Kumongous in here somewhere. I'm not sure which one it should replace. Probably this one, but it's just like I honestly have no idea. But just for Kaijus, you want to play differently named Kaijus. That's like the big thing. I know at the locals profile I played 2 Gamma Seal. You want to play differently named ones. Anytime that you can reduce the chances to mill duplicates with Hydrolander, you should take it. And all these cards basically do the same thing because they're, for the most part, their attack points don't matter because you just Boral Sword over them anyway. And in those cases, it's even better to have a higher attack monster. But I mean, you don't want to just always rely on Boral Sword, but these cards were really good. And then the cards that I cut instead of playing the other like Kaijus, the card that I added was 2-Droll and Lockbird to sort of hedge my bets against the FTK. This was probably the biggest mistake I made with this entire deck list, more so than playing Danger Snake at 3 copies. Like it wasn't even worth hedging my bets. I should have just, what I decided to do Saturday morning is that if my opponent was playing more than 40 cards, which meant like the Danger FTK, I would just go first or win the die roll. I think that was a much better idea. I ended up doing that anyway, and I ended up being pretty good against FTK. It's just like like this was just so bad because at 2 you just don't draw them enough for it to actually be good. I drew this as my 6th card so often. It just should have been, I don't know if it should have been a kaiju. I think like a random BA monster like Rubik and then like a rescue cat would have been way better than this card. I felt like my kaiju count was fine. I thought 4 was perfectly fine, but this card was so terrible in the main deck, even though it's like a going second deck, because just like I just realized that you can't go second against like the FTK. You just lose. Like this isn't enough. Maybe if this card was like Reaper, it would have been fine because Reaper's good against FTK. Reaper's good against Goki, but also Reaper's level 3 monster that you can make a Dante with. That might have been the right choice. This was not the right choice. That was probably the worst card of my entire deck. And then 3 copies of literally just Pot of Greed. This card is ridiculous. It's better Pot of Greed in the decks that can use it. It's not better Pot of Greed in case it's not generic, but it is in the decks that can use this, which is not a lot of decks, basically just Mermails in this deck. This is better than Pot of Greed just because it shuffles. Not only do you draw 2 cards, you also get to shuffle a card back, and that shuffle effect is so important. Not only is like it's good if you draw this card, you can mill this card and it's really good, whereas like Pot of Greed, you wouldn't be able to mill. Like if you could play like 1 Pot of Greed in this deck, or 3 Seconds Light, like I would play 3 Seconds Light. This card is so stupid. Like Pot of Greed is definitely like the better card overall, but in the decks that can play Seconds Light, this card's ridiculous. So I highly recommend playing Seconds Light. I know some Burning Abyss players are not playing that card, which is crazy to me. Definitely want to play Seconds Light. Moving on though, we have 2 copies of Dante. You never need 3. You don't really need 2. I mean, you kind of do, but not really. 1 copy Beatrice, 1 copy Purple Dante. I was going to cut this, and most people that you watch say they want to cut it, but the reason you still play this card is because if everyone says they're going to cut this card from the extra deck, then suddenly people actually do start destroying Beatrice with like Cerberus. So I felt like I had to play it just in case my opponent was going to try to destroy Beatrice. For the Link monsters, we have Underclock Taker, really important. 2 Phoenix, probably the best Link monster in here besides Boral Sword. Mermaid, Cerberus, Unicorn, Topologic Trispania. I borrowed a Topologic Bomber Dragon from my friend. That's what that was. Boral Sword Dragon, Borlord Dragon, and then Firewall Dragon. So Firewall Dragon is technically in here just for cherries, but you can actually do this really crazy combo if you open... Like, it requires some lucky mills because you have to open, like, Rhino, Malicious, and then, like, multiple BA monsters and stuff like that, and some dangers in there. But if you open this really specific hand and get some lucky mills, you can actually do this play. And I did this once in the tournament, and it was ridiculous. I was so proud of myself. But basically, you end with Firewall Dragon, and then a Nightmare Phoenix, and then you make a Beatrice next to the Nightmare Phoenix, and then you add back a Hydrolander with a Firewall Dragon to summon it next to the Phoenix. So you end with Firewall Dragon, Phoenix, Beatrice, Hydrolander, and it's just like crazy. So that combo doesn't come up very often. It doesn't come up when you go second. When you go first and you mill a Hydrolander, and you have like just all like starter cards, you can actually just make Firewall, Phoenix, bounce back the Hydrolander. It's really crazy. I only did it once, but I was really proud of myself because I thought that combo was one that a lot of people like didn't even know existed. But because one of the things with this deck is that it's actually easier to make a Link 4 like Firewall that only takes 2 monsters than it is to make Boral Sword. A lot of times you end up using like a Link 3 and then ranking down into a Link 2 just to make the Boral Sword. Anyway, though, so for the side deck, we have 2 copies of Majesty's Fiend, 1 copy of Vanity's Fiend. I think I should have just played more copies of these cards. They were really good. Obviously, I couldn't find a 3rd Vanity's Fiend, and none of the vendors had it, but the Vanity's Fiend isn't as good as against Dangers because they were being ruled that they could still reveal themselves for some reason. And then we have 3 copies of Cherries, 2 copies of Sphere Mode, 1 copy of Droll, just the 3rd copy or whatever, and then 3 Twin, 3 Reboot. These cards allegedly are good, but like a lot of times in this deck, I would just draw like 2 Twin and then there's like cards that aren't good discarding. I don't know, they're like weird. Like these cards, obviously as like an Altergeist player, like these cards suck to have drawn against you, but sometimes your opponent only draws these cards and no actual like engine cards, and then they can't kill you or whatever. But anyway, hope you guys enjoyed today's deck profile. I know I didn't do that good at the tournament, but I had a lot of fun and I got to play every single game, which is really exciting. That's why I played this deck, and I think it worked pretty well. BA is looking good in the future if like the Goki deck and the FTK deck get hit, because it's obviously, it wants to go second. It doesn't want to go first. It wants to go second, OTK your opponent. But I'll see you guys later. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.